Hey y'all, Brennan here. It is a Wednesday, and I was gonna make a video about something I kind of already made a video about, but I wanted to expand upon, and that's something that's going around a lot. What with trans visibility, more trans actors being out there, more trans characters being written in mainstream film and TV, and that is it okay for cis actors to play transgender people? Um, uh, I it's complicated um, because I feel like I've done a lot of performance art in my life. I did a lot of spoken word. I used to do acting, and I did like set crew and stuff. So I spent a lot of time in like theater environments, and I think a lot of people who are actors and who do theater or any kind of performance art, be it dance or oral poetry or like stand up, are very aware of the body and very aware of like their physical self in the world, and they play with that. Um, I think a lot of people who act are sensitive to gender in their own lives, are sensitive to how masculinity plays into what kind of roles they get, or like femininity, how that plays into what kind of roles they get, how to kind of like play this social game. One of the most interesting and slash annoying things about most of the performance artists and actors I know is that they have a lot of social intelligence, and that's something that I'm just starting to gain. They have like so much social intelligence that they can be a little manipulative sometimes. Always that fine line. Whereas I have such emotional intelligence that I can be emotionally manipulative at times. I think it's just the way intelligence works. But that aside, uh, I think there's a difference between like exploring gender with your art and playing a character that like doesn't reflect your experience at all. And I mean, I think it's just because like transsexualism crosses into this like physical sphere where like and it's the same thing with like when you talk about blackface, like um and it is something that comes down to the physicality, or yellow face or things like that, where it's like you have actors available who have these features, who have this look, um be it an ethnic look or be it like transgender. There are androgynous people in the world already, and to take somebody who doesn't live that physical existence of physically straddling the line of physical sex, and just throw a prosthetic on them and like make their some lipstick on a guy with male features. It's just really it's insulting. Trying to put my finger on like how it's insulting. Um, because there's like plenty. Because there's also like a timeline issue, because there's been times where transgender people had no visibility, like Boys Don't Cry, for example. That came out. Let me check when that movie came out. Um, because that's like the first like FTM visibility movie. Like people, like even now, like when I tell people I'm trans, they don't know it like goes both ways. Like they don't know that there's like people with vaginas out in the world who like live as men. They like don't even know that exists. Okay, 99. So that's crazy. Like the FTM movement and like butches and like especially gay trans men really started to come out of the woodwork in the 90s. So like that movie was really groundbreaking, and Hilary Swank's role is really groundbreaking. And I mean, I think she's fantastic in it. um I think she brings a lot of like vulnerability and toughness to a character. I think um I mean, I don't know Hilary Swank personally, but just like from a lot of the roles she's chosen, it's the same way I kind of feel about like Mila Jovovich or what's her face, like Tilda Swinton. You know, people like that who really do a lot of like gender bendy roles. I feel like they might be people who are cognizant to gender in their own lives, slash might transcend, be sensitive to gender in their own lives, like on an expectation level or on like a presentation level, like um yeah, like feeling comfortable having like I don't know, like Anne Hathaway. I think she's like one of those like kind of women who is like, you know, she isn't super feminine, and she really fights for that being like okay in a feminine space. And I think she's really sensitive to gender as like a woman who's not like typically feminine, and I think that that's somebody that I honestly like would feel comfortable playing a transmasculine person had it been like 30 years ago. Like because there's enough trans actors out there, there's enough trans artists out there, there's enough of us really struggling to get our stories out there, and just having it like passed over and over again, just really frustrating. Um, I can't really speak to it from an acting perspective. Like I'm not an actor, but I know it always really annoyed me in fashion until Andrea Peljic came out. But like it always annoyed me in fashion that like there are like a huge availability of trans people who do fashion modeling, who do like fetish modeling or like any sort of like modeling that toys the gender in the body. Like I've done art modeling myself. I've really wanted to get back into like working with like fetish photographers who like are portraying gender on like, you know, gender bending kind of stuff. I would love to like do more modeling work as like a trans model. I think that'd be really cool. But it's like really weird to see like your body imitated in art, but not like be okay to exist. Like for a while, there was a trend kind of before more fashion models started coming out as like genderqueer and like being on hormones, which is what happened with Andrea Peljic, and like there's a couple other transmasculine fashion models out there. But it's like for a while they're in this weird space where it's like fashion was playing with the idea of androgyny and playing with the idea of transness without really hiring trans like actually transsexual models, and that's super insulting. It's like you think our body's like fashionable, but like you don't actually want to hire us. You think our story gets views and gets, you know, in the case of like transparent and things like that, our story gets ratings, it gets views, it gets interest, it gets a lot of fetishistic and voyeuristic interest, but you're not going to pay us to tell our own story. Like that's really, it's exploitative. Like there's really no other word for that. Um, and I know that like as a writer, I don't know. My writing doesn't. I haven't been able to go towards gender yet in my writing. I think it's a combination of getting sober has just been really hard on my I use drinking to create a lot, and it like in the absence of that, it's been really hard to write. I think that's something a lot of people experience in recovery, especially people who are writers. Well, it's just really hard to return to my old like frame of mind and where I was at. A lot of my old pieces like just don't resonate with me anymore when I try and go back and like work with them. But when I paint, I work a lot with the body, and I mean, it's really hard to get your art out there if you're not a white guy. Like it's still like that. And I think that's something that people don't really talk about, especially with art. Um, because yeah, there's more representation in art, but the people creating it and getting the recognition for creating it are still like mostly men, are still mostly white, and it's really frustrating. Are still mostly cis and straight. Um, you know, and then you just have all these like instances in music, which I think is another genre where like it's really hard to make it as like a trans artist in music, or like a queer artist in music, like Leaf, like LE1F. He Macklemore ripped off his beat, and Leaf is like a black queer artist from New York who's like really involved in like the drag scene and like the kind of like the gender fucking scene, and like Macklemore ripped off this queer black artist's beat, and like a lot of like the sort of elements of queer culture and like specifically queer people of color's culture. Macklemore ripped off a lot of that and then got famous with it and was all this like, you know, ally shit with it, and that's really insulting. And Lady Gaga does the same thing, using the gay aesthetic, exploiting the gay aesthetic, and actually like stealing from artists who are up and coming, which is just really shitty. Like that's not. It's like the same kind of thing with like Amanda Palmer not paying her opening acts. Like that's really, it's really shitty. Like you're her studio musicians. Like you can't do that. Especially when you're an artist who came from kind of an underground scene. I think, you know, I'm really, as far as music goes, I'm really involved in punk rock. Like that's probably the scene I'm the most familiar with is like punk and hardcore. It's a fucking boys club, and it is changing. But there's still, you know, you read articles about punk and hardcore, and it's like female fronted hardcore band, like female fronted is a genre, and it's not. Like it could be like a female fronted oi band and a female fronted like post hardcore band are two completely different genres. They don't have a lot in common except the person singing this shit happens to have a vagina. Like that's, I don't know, that doesn't really seem like any reason to group an artist together with another artist unless you're being like super sexist. I know that like punk rock was a way that I was able to assert masculinity. I know it's a really like awful space for women. Like women get pushed around in it a lot. I felt that way before. Like there's this sort of like, you know, the thing that women confront all the time that like what you're into isn't legit. But yeah, I mean there's a lot of queer punk musicians that are starting to get recognition. Like queercore is starting to become more of a thing. There's more like queer festivals and stuff like that, and like queerness has always been inherent in punk. Like, you know, from the day Iggy Pop like was wearing dresses on stage, like it's always, gender bending has always been part of punk rock. And it's really cool to see trans artists like Laura Jane Grace. And she's not the first. She's not the first transgender punk musician. There's been a lot. There's been a lot of like just queer punk musicians in general. Darby Crash, like Iggy Pop is like, you know, he's into like he cross dresses. Like there's I think he calls himself a transvestite, which I know there's like a lot of like hot button issues on that. But anyway, I feel like I'm like getting way far away. But I just know that like myself. You know, when I go online and I see just time and time again people like Dan Savage writing about trans people, I see a lot of, you know, Lacey Greens of the world, and like they're allies, and that's cool. I have mixed feelings about Dan Savage just because of how he doesn't really think that like bi men exist, and like please leave my like target audience alone. Like bi men definitely exist. They're wonderful. They're like the gems of the earth. So I don't know. I think trans people just need the chance to be able to tell our own stories for a while, because I'm really sick of like the grand narrative. I'm really sick of people oversimplifying it, and you know it's really frustrating to be like, to be somebody who these days writes in like the nonfiction genre or nonfiction medium or whatever the fuck. And like I do a lot of like advocacy writing and writing about like gender theory and stuff, to have like people really challenge me on a lot of the points I'm making, but then like John Oliver goes on stage and says something about like the same stuff I've been saying for like a year, about how like I don't have a lot of job security, and people straight up say it can't be that bad and like don't believe me, but then John Oliver says it and they believe him. Like, you know, I think it would really surprise people to really sit down and look at how many transgender women and men on screen have been played by people with like normative and cisgender bodies, putting on literal prosthetics to imitate bodies that we actually have, but are considered like too I guess obscene. Like, I really do think it's an obscenity thing, or they're seen as just too obscene or disturbing to actually cast and actually show. Um, and I think it's also happening in porn. You know, I pay a lot of attention to pornography as like just a medium and an art form. The industry's changed a lot, and you're seeing more of these like amateur porn collectives that are rolling out these videos that have transgender people in them and actual like transgender bodies, but they're not fetishized. It's not like trap porn. It's not like everybody in the situation knows that that's the body they're dealing with, and it's beautiful and it's like so meaningful to be able to like, because you know I'm a porn watcher. A lot of people are, and like to be able to see my own body not being seen as something weird or like a fetish or just being seen as a body and interacted with as something that can give and receive pleasure. And that's like to go so long without seeing that and just kind of feeling like I don't know, you really only exist in porn. That's how it feels. It's like the only time you ever see like actual for a long time the only time you'd actually see like actual transsexual body um or a trans person being a trans person would be in really like degrading fetishistic porn, and like that's changing both in porn and because like our stories are being told more widely. But I still would like I don't know, just like as a writer and as an artist and as somebody who does like performance work, like I would love to be the authority on my own story. I would love to see Laverne Cox play Catwoman and nobody bats an eyelash. Like I don't know, and it's not a thing, and it doesn't make the news. It's just an actress playing a role, and I don't know. It's scattered per usual, but I hope this kind of like sheds light on why. Because I think people don't understand this point, like especially cis people, they don't really get like, oh, it's just acting, like you're just playing a part. It's like, but I'm not a part, like I'm not a role. Um, it's trans face, like I don't know, especially when like you have to go out of your way prosthetically to make somebody imitate what you think our bodies look like, and when you could just get someone who actually looks like that and is sexy the way they are. I don't know, just weird to me. But that's all for me. I gotta go find a job. Have a good day.